So today we're going to use the grass vest method to look at the soil structure in this field. So this paddock was recently cut for silage, so we'll have a look and see what's going on underground. Once the pre-hole is dug, we can now go ahead and take out the cube of soil for the grass vest evaluation. The important thing here to remember is when you're taking out the cube, don't push back and forward on the spade, push side to side because we don't want to compact the sample. It's important to take out an intact sample and try and go to a depth of 20 to 25 centimeters. So we have our sample, so let's bring it back to the table to have a look. First thing we're going to have a look at is where the root mat layer is. So we're going to get two zones, the root zone and the zone below that we're going to actually look and score it for grass vest. So I reckon just having a look here, I can see the roots are coming down about maybe 7 to 10 centimeters roughly. So I would say that's kind of the first, the split zone there. Second thing we're going to do before we open up the soil cube is just have a look and see can we find any compaction. You can do this with a knife. So if you just use your knife and poke it in, so wherever you feel some resistance, there's some compaction. So it feels pretty good at the bottom down here, but as I get to the top, I'm feeling some compaction up here. It's much tighter. When I dig it in, it's much tighter, much looser in here at the bottom when I dig in. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the sample open because we don't want to assess the outer layers because they may have been impacted by the spade. So we make a cut with the knife and then basically peel it open like a book. Nice and gently so you don't damage the sample. That's it. So also straight away I feel there's quite tight binding on the root layer as well, which is a good sign. Okay, so we've identified before we even started that there is some compaction in the top 10 centimeters just by doing the jab test. I'm going to try that again on the inside. Yeah, nice and loose at the bottom. When I come up to about 10 to 12 centimeters, we're getting a little bit of compaction there straight away. So there's a couple of things you need to look out for when you're doing a grass vest before you go to score it. There's a number of things like aggregate size is number one. What we mean about aggregates is naturally the soil forms aggregates. So the structure at the bottom, in the bottom section, say from 10 centimeters to 20 centimeters, quite crumbly, very breadcrumb-like structure, breaks away easily. Nice, lots of ability for water and nutrients to move in that soil. So there's no problem at all, nice and loose. The aggregates are quite small. You can see here most of the aggregates are very small, ranging maybe up to, I'd say, a maximum of about, the biggest ones are about maybe 2 to 3 centimeters. As we get up to up to 12 centimeters down, it's getting much tighter, so I'm finding it a bit harder to break. So let's break this open and see what's inside. So as you can see, the aggregates are breaking away now. This is between about 10 and 12 centimeters. And it's always good to take notes as you're going along as well, so you can remember what you've discovered. So these are the size aggregates I'm finding from 10 to 12. So you can see much bigger. So at the lower section we have nice granular structure, which is really good. As we're getting up higher into the area where I found a bit of compaction with the knife, you can see that the aggregates are getting much bigger, and that's a sign that there's some compaction happening. Now there's not just the size is important, but also the shape as well. So we can see here these are kind of subangular, more rounded structure aggregates. You can also get more angular ones, so the more angular they are in structure, the worse the compaction is. But we can see here sometimes if you break them apart, if they break apart and they're quite angular when they break apart and you can almost stick them back together like a jigsaw, that's not a good sign. We want them to break away nice and gently from each other, because the more compact they are inside, the more issue the water and nutrients have to move around, and also the roots and earthworms and all the other life that lives in the soil as well. As we go a little bit higher, we'll break this apart again. You can see it's actually much tighter at the top here. We're probably in the top 10 centimeters at the moment, so I'm going to break apart. Aggregates still reasonable size, but getting a bit bigger. Here's a big stone. Stones are a sign of drainage. More stones, more drainage. Not seeing too many earthworms here today, but again, as I said, it's quite dry here today, so I'd say they've gone a bit deeper. So even though we've had some granular structure at the bottom, say below 20 centimeters, then we've had the structures, a little bit of compaction there in that area just above that, probably about 15 centimeters, and then around the 10 centimeters, not so bad. The aggregates are getting smaller again as we approach the top. Again, the aggregates are quite small. The other thing we need to look out for as well is aggregate strength. So these are quite small, they break easily. These ones where we thought was a bit more compaction are a bit tighter. I have to squeeze them that bit harder to break them up. So aggregate strength, if it takes a bit of pressure to break them up, that's another sign of deteriorating quality, soil quality, and a bit of compaction there as well. That one's quite difficult to break. As we get a little bit higher, around the 10 centimeter mark, they're actually quite easy to break. That one is a bit more difficult, so there is some compaction there. So when we open up the aggregates, we like to look at the porosity inside. So when we open this one, we can see that there's one or two roots that are able to penetrate the aggregate, but in general, most roots can't seem to get in there. There's not much porosity in there. We can see one or two signs of actual issues here. If you can see those little rust marks inside, or iron oxidization, where water is able to get in from the top. When it tries to soak down through the ground, it can't get any further because it's stopped with compaction, and it evaporates back off and it leaves these deposits, or iron oxide deposits. So that's a sign of mottling, so that's a sign of compaction. So colour to watch out for. Sometimes you can see it on kind of more wetter soils. It can be grey mottling as well, red or grey mottling. So if we look at the root layer, we can see the root layer here actually in the top up to maybe 8 centimeters is actually quite good. Lots of rooting, lots of hairy roots going everywhere. The aggregates are quite small and crummy, very nice. The odd little big one, but it's very easy to break up. In general, roots are travelling very well, accessing most areas of soil. So I'd be happy with that root structure. When we open it up, roots are everywhere, and a lovely structure inside. So no issues here. Lots and lots of roots, lots of access to water, lots of access to nutrients, and they're even going pretty deep. Some of those roots are going down 15, maybe even a bit more centimeters.